Right, so I just wanted to do a quick overview of a couple quick topics from your midterm review that are probably the only topics that we haven't seen more recently. So, if you look at the front page, one of the skills that we have not necessarily reviewed more recently is writing equations in slope-intercept form, writing equations of lines through points. So I wanted to look at this and just remind you of, and not that you can't go back and look at your notes or even go back and look at the videos for this from before, but just to give you a quick reminder, again, if you need more instruction on this, go back and look through your notebook, go back and look at the video on this topic. But as far as writing equations of lines, reminder that the first place we want to start is, and this is number 1 on the packet, and I'm going to show you 2 ways to find this equation. The first way and the second way both start the same, remembering finding slope. To find slope, we have to take our y, it's y2 minus y1, our y value subtracted, over our x values subtracted. So if I'm looking at my y values, I'm going to do, just remember, xy, xy. Remember, you need to do it in the same order. So if I go from 5 to 0, I need to subtract 1 minus negative 1, so that would be 1 plus 1. So my slope is the first thing I'm going to find, no matter what form of equation I'm writing. Now, again, this is the first way. I'm going to remind you of how to write equations in slope-intercept form. You can use whatever method you want, but I'm going to write slope-intercept form y equals mx plus b with as much as I know right now. Right now, I know the m value. Y equals 5 over 2 x plus b. I need to figure out what the y-intercept is. To do that, I'm going to take one of my points, and I'm going to take, in this case, I'm taking 1 comma 5. There's an x, there's a y value, and I'm going to plug those in where I see x and y. This is not the method that most of you used when we were actually doing this unit, but I'm going to remind you of it anyway. So we can solve for b here by multiplying 5 halves. 5 halves is the same thing as 2.5. So I'm going to change this to 2.5 plus b, and I'm going to subtract to get b alone. 5 minus 2.5 is 2.5. So now I know enough to write my equation. I have y equals 5 over 2x plus, and I could write this as 5 over 2 or 2.5 or 2.5, but there is my equation. So in slope-intercept form, starting with the slope and then filling in using one of the x's and y's from my points. Now the second way to do this still involves the same first step. Find my slope. So I'm going to do 2 minus negative 2, which is 4. And then I'm going to do negative 1 minus 0, which is negative 1. So that means my slope is negative 4. Now the second way to do this, which is the more popular way when we were going through this, was to write point-slope form first, and then change it into slope-intercept form. So if you remember point-slope form, and again, go back and look in your notebook, point-slope form, y minus y1 equals m parentheses x minus x1. We're going to fill in m, x1, and y1. So I'm going to take my slope, and I'm going to take a point. So there's my x and my y. So I'm going to say y minus, the y value I have is 2. I'm going to plug in my slope, and then I have x minus negative 1. So that's going to become plus 1. Now, the idea here is, remember, these are going to be, because of the minus, this is going to turn in, it looks like the opposite signs of what the number actually is in the coordinates. But to turn this into slope-intercept form, distribute negative 4x minus 4 y minus 2 equals that. Add 2 to get y alone. And I have my equation, y equals negative 4x minus 2. I think overall, I mostly did the questions on the key this way. If you look, just to double check, I don't know if you noticed at the very beginning here, the point here we had, because it's 0 comma a number, actually is the y-intercept, which means my b value is negative 2, which matches what my equation ended up being. So if you need a reminder about how to write equations in slope-intercept form, there's numbers 1 and 2 done for you. You have this and a Quizlet that you could use to help you practice this, as well as Alex and probably other resources that you could find. The other skill I just wanted to review with you quickly was, and I'm turning to the back page, this is number 20, finding slopes and intercepts from equations. So when we get an equation, recognizing the format can help you with at least part of this. If I recognize this format as slope-intercept form, I can get the slope of this line as 4/5. I can get the y-intercept of this line as 0, 4. And then the only piece I'm missing here is the x-intercept. The question I've asked you repeatedly, what do you know about intercepts? When we talk about a y-intercept, you know the x value is 0. When you have a x-intercept, you know that if it's on the x-axis, you must have a y value that's 0. So I'm going to take my equation, and to figure out the part I don't know, the x-intercept, I'm going to plug in 0 for y. And now I'm going to solve for x. Make sure you get x alone on one side. So I need to subtract 4. And then get rid of this 4/5, which is multiplying x. Divide by 4/5. So negative 4 divided by 4/5 is negative 4 times, keep it, change it, flip it, times the reciprocal. So this would be negative 5, which is my x value. So that would be my x-intercept. So to find intercepts, remember, plug in 0 for one of the values and solve for the other. So plug in 0 for y to find the x-intercept. Plug in 0 for x, and you can find the y-intercept if you don't have another way to do it. Okay, I wanted to do, sorry, this is not number 20. This is actually number 24, but just so you have seen it, as far as finding the slope, x-intercept, and y-intercept for a different form of line, this one being standard form. The easiest values to find on here are your x-intercepts and your y-intercept. Because, again, think about how do I find my x-intercept? I know that the y value is 0. So if I take my equation and I plug in 0 for y, all I have to do is solve. 5 times 0 cancels out as 0, and x is negative 10. There is my x-intercept. If I want to find the y-intercept, I know that the x value is 0 because it's on the y-axis. Think about points that are on the y-axis. They all have a y value of 0. Or sorry, an x value of 0. So if I plug in 0 for x, and I solve, 5y equals negative 10. Divide by 5. There's my y-intercept. Now these are not the only ways that I can get those values, but if you take those values now, one way I can find my missing piece, which is slope, is I can take those 2 points, negative 2, 10, 0, and 0, negative 2, and I actually can find the slope from those. Subtract the y's, 0 minus negative 2, and in the same order, subtract the x's. So 2 over negative 10 is negative 1/5. So my slope is negative 1/5. How else could I find at least a couple of these values easily? I could take x plus 5y equals negative 10, and I could change it into slope-intercept form. Isolate the y value. That would be, if I think about it quickly, negative 1/5 x minus 2. And again, at least I'm able to get a couple of those values right off the bat. So this is meant to just be a quick overview. If you need to use other resources to review, then please do so. But check the key, make sure you're checking your work, and use your resources to help you review.